What is going on, guys? Robbie here from the Big Red Express. How are you guys doing? I am doing fantastic. I don't know about you, but this feels right. I know for a long time I told you guys I was coming back and I was going to be back and better than ever when it comes to the podcast, but let's be honest, it has been a tough past year for everybody, not just me, not just somebody that has been affected by this virus, not somebody that I've obviously been able to still continue to go to work. I'm very thankful for all of that. But at the end of the day, it came down to, do I really have the passion for CrossFit and for reporting on the CrossFit Games and things of that nature? Fast forward 1 year, the CrossFit Games happened this year. And let me tell you, I don't think I've had as much fun watching, learning, digesting the CrossFit sport than I did this past year at the CrossFit Games. Last weekend was one of the most fun times that I think we have had all year long. And don't get me wrong, I've been enjoying sports as they've been coming out. I've been enjoying watching them on a weekly basis, on a day-to-day basis. And obviously, one of the first sports that I kind of got back into was hockey when the Stanley Cup playoffs happened. And that was one thing that I really got involved in and got invested in because I really wanted to watch sports. And that was the first sport that I could get invested in. I'm not a big basketball fan except for March Madness. Obviously, that didn't happen this year. But to see the sports come back as well as they did with very small problems that they did, I think overall it was a huge success and very awesome to see just sports come back in general. Which leads me to the CrossFit Games, and we talked about this a little bit on our recap shows on how successful the CrossFit Games were. And we're going to talk a little bit about today. It's not going to be a long episode, just kind of a easing back into this thing. Well, there's not really too much to talk about in the CrossFit atmosphere except for the games and the future of the sport leading into this next year in 2021. And what I think is going to happen is there's going to be a lot of big shifts because obviously there's new management. There's new ownership for CrossFit. There's also a new start date for the Open. It's crazy to think that this year has been so nuts that a year ago is when the CrossFit Open was for this last season. And now moving back to February, I think that's ultimately the greatest decision that Dave Castro could have made, that Eric Rosa could have made. And I think that's going to kind of put things on track. But it will really depend on what comes next. What is after the Open in February? Do we have regionals? Do they bring back regionals? Do they bring back sanctionals? Do all these different events that happened before the Open, will they happen again? Will Dubai still happen? Will Wadapalooza still happen? Obviously, this is things that are still up in the air and really will depend on the world and how things are going with the coronavirus, how things are going with the health of the entire world, because I'm sure a lot of people still don't feel comfortable traveling overseas. A lot of people still don't feel comfortable traveling in the United States just from state to state. So I think it's going to have a lot to depend on what's going to happen. Will they do it kind of the same as they did this year? Again, it just depends on the state of the world, I believe. And I think we're going to get a lot more answers come February 23rd, and probably over the next couple of months. I have a feeling that Eric Rosa, Dave Castro, the team of experts that they have running the CrossFit Games, Justin, they will all come together and be like, hey, this is our plan. This is what we want to do. How can we do this safely and effectively? Yes. Some criticisms I had of the CrossFit Games were only 5 men, only 5 women. Didn't really get a whole sense of, hey, that's how the final, quote-unquote, the final should have been. Yes, I know they had the online competition. I get that. But at the end of the day, Online competitions are not aren't anywhere close to in-person competitions. And I think that we're going to see that more and more as time goes on. We're going to see that more and more as things kind of progress. I'm excited to see what happens. I'm excited to see how we as a CrossFit community come together and try to make this work. I know a lot of people are skeptical about this entire coronavirus to begin with, and we're not going to get into that. That's a political issue. This isn't a political podcast. Maybe I'll start one of those after the election. I don't know. Probably not. But I'm curious to know what they're going to do. Are they going to do another kind of online regional competition than an in-person CrossFit Games? Or is that 1 year of national champions, is that out the door? Are national champions not relevant anymore? Are sanctionals not relevant anymore? All of these questions are questions we're going to have to start asking ourselves. We're going to have to start asking Dave Castro and them, but we need to give it time. And I'm the first person to tell you, I hate being patient. I hate waiting. I hate everything that has to do with not getting an answer right now. But I think it's important. They are going to go back. I'm sure they took the week off. They're going to go back and they're going to examine the pros and the cons of this past season. Obviously, not the most ideal situation. And I'm sure if it was up to them, they would have had a lot more competitors come over. They would have had a lot more fans around. But at the end of the day, that wasn't the state of the world that we are in. I'm excited to see what happens moving forward, especially since the CrossFit Open is now back in February. I'm curious to know if they are going to keep sanctionals a thing. And with the sanctional still being a thing, how often, is that going to affect the way that we look at the CrossFit Games moving forward? I think, last year they had a great idea opening it up to national champions, people that had never thought that they would ever be able to qualify for the CrossFit Games before had an opportunity because they were the fittest in their country. I loved that. I thought it was a unique idea. I thought it was something that I wasn't really sure how it was going to open up. I thought once they got to the CrossFit Games, they could have done it differently. I do believe that they could have at least given them 3 or 4 events before they made the first cut. Again, I get what they were trying to do. I do. It's one of those things where, like, I'm playing Monday morning quarterback here, and I think that's all we can do right now is we can compare what we want to see to what we've seen before and try to iron things out as best we can. Today was this past CrossFit Games was something that we never thought we'd even see. I had doubts that the CrossFit Games were even going to happen once they kept pushing it back to, it's supposed to be in August. Then they pushed it back to September. Then they pushed it back again to October. They weren't even sure if California would let them have a competition. And that's why they had to cut it down the way they did, have the online competition and things of that nature. And again, I think so many times we look at things and we are so critical, especially I think in CrossFit. I will be the first one to admit I have been very critical of things that Dave Castro has done, some of the programming, some of the things that CrossFit has done as an organization. I have been very, very vocal on this platform that is not what should be happening. They shouldn't be doing this. They should be doing something else. Or they need to be looking out for athlete safety. You know what? As crazy as this past year has been, as insane as the CrossFit Games was this year, and as dominant as it was by Matt Frazier and Tia Claire Toomey, I thought it was one of the best run CrossFit Games in recent memory. And especially with everything they had to cope with everything that they had to adhere by, I don't know if you could have done it any better than what the CrossFit Games did. Do I think it could have been done better about, isolating athletes? But again, none of the athletes tested positive for COVID while they were in the bubble. So that's a positive thing. That's first and foremost the number one thing that I think is important. The safety of the athletes, the players' health, or the athletes' health. And when you're talking about questions and expectations, how is Eric Rosa going to take the reins in his first full season as head of CrossFit? Will he work directly with Dave Castro? Will he be in the ranks of the CrossFit Games? Does he want a hand in the CrossFit Games? I think he has every right to want a hand in the CrossFit Games. I think from years past, Dave Castro really wanted to control it by himself, and Greg Glassman let him control it by himself. But with that, I think we want to see a lot of, at least as me as a fan, me as a commentator, me as a part of the media, me personally, I want to see more clarity. I want to see more transparency when it comes to the policies, the progress, and the standards of CrossFit as an organization. I think it is so important, more important than anything, that a drug policy be laid out. And I know it's been laid out before, and I know they have popped people for it multiple times. Big name athletes, lesser known athletes, some athletes that have placed very well at the CrossFit Games and down the line. But at the end of the day, it's hard for me to say, and again, I don't want to be a doubter. I don't want to be someone that's going to be like, oh, well, there's got to be something fishy if they're having that dominant of performance. But maybe they're just that freaking good. Like, it's hard for me to come back, and I can obviously be the first hater being like, hey, Matt Fraser must be taking something. But maybe Matt Fraser's just that good of an athlete. Maybe he's just a superhuman. People thought that Rich Froning was doing something back when he was winning 4 or 5 times in a row. But nothing came of it. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe nothing does need to come of it. But I would love to see more transparency. I would love to see proof of drug testing actually happening. I know there's been a lack or of inconsistency over the years about drug testing in the CrossFit Games. So I would love to see that take the next step. I would love to see like a third party being in charge of that, not just CrossFit. I know they have a third party, but I think the third party reports to CrossFit, and then CrossFit is allowed to reveal the results however they like. And again, that's one of the things that I think we're never going to get away with because of it's a privately owned company. Now with new management, I would love to see the transparency from everybody involved, including Eric. And I think if Eric Gross is watching this, and I want to speak directly to him for just a second, transparency is something that we as fans, we as the media want to see. You may not have access to it us at all times, but one of the things that I think other professional organizations do, and other owners, and obviously people have problems with the other owners and managers and things of that nature when it comes to professional sports. And sometimes you're not going to be the most popular person with everybody involved. But I think it's very important as an owner of a new company to be transparent with your fans, with your athletes, and to be transparent with everybody that's in charge of the CrossFit Games. And that starts from the top. If you can address that early enough, if you can address that early enough, then I think we've got a big future, and the CrossFit Games could be bigger and better than ever before. And it all starts this coming year in 2021. The 2020-2021 season has, I guess, officially started. I know it doesn't really officially start technically until the CrossFit Games open. The CrossFit Open in February. I'm excited that it's back in February. I think that's where it belongs. Never should have moved, but that's just a personal opinion. Guys, that was episode 1. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope we can continue to bring great content, a great atmosphere during this podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Buzzsprout, really anywhere you get our podcast or anywhere you get your podcast, you can listen to us there. Thanks so much, guys, and we will talk to you next week. Later.